Hey guys, in this episode, I want to talk about Kihon. So Kihon, I use this a lot. In my other videos, I talk about Kihon and its relationship to Kiso or your foundation, and that Kihon meaning basics. Kihon as far as like the building blocks of your foundation. But it's interesting when you talk to people, and especially that come from other martial arts, and when you really start asking the deeper questions, um, it starts to reveal people's thought processes and what they perceive as basics. So, for in our art, in the Bujinkan, when you say Kihon, people connect it to kata, like Kihon kata. And I'm generalizing. Um, but what is actually, I think, more important is it's not the kata, it's the inner workings of the kata. It's what makes the kata do what it does. And what exactly are the basics? What are Kion? If you were to ask, show me the basics, what would you be taught? And this is where you're going to get different answers with different people. But something came up in class the other night when I was teaching, and I thought, this is what, in my opinion, basics are. Um, and maybe I'm diving more into like Kihon no Kihon or basics of the basics, right? It's not the building block, it's actually the construction of that block itself, the materials you use, how it's made, that determines the quality of that block. And maybe I'm kind of going into more into that level, but I really think this brought up a really interesting point, and I wanted to share it with you. And maybe you've had similar kinds of revelations or similar kinds of experiences. Or maybe if you're a teacher, maybe you share things at this level in your class too, and you consider these to be Kihon. So the other night in my class, it was one of those weird kind of nights, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this, that for whatever reason, life decided to throw every obstacle in people's lives to keep them from coming to class. And so out of my entire group of people, I had two that actually came to class. And, just on a side, I don't care if one person shows up, I'm still going to hold class and show up. That's my commitment. One, it's my own training, but two, it's my commitment to my students. And I hope that you're also in that training environment, because I hear horror stories about instructors. They only want to teach a class if there's this many people, and they consider it a waste of time if there's. I really hope that's not your situation, or that you're not that kind of person. That even one person gives you such a good opportunity, because when I only have like maybe one, two, maybe three people, it gives me a really good chance to focus on those specific things that those individuals need in their training, that we can really take the time to break things down. And this was one of those nights. And I didn't know what I was going to do. The lesson plan was completely out the window, because my whole lesson plan was structured for the entire class to be there and for us to work on some material. So I just chucked all of that and I went with my gut. And the individuals that showed up, one was a brand new Shodan, and the other one is a brand new white belt. Just he's only been training with me for about maybe 5 weeks now. And so it was such a huge contrast. And deciding what it is we need to train on. And I thought, you know what? Let's just take this to the most simplistic stuff, and let's focus on that. And so what I started with was the munedori, or the grabbing the jacket or lapel, and how you grab, uh, and where your body alignment is and stuff when you grab. So I don't want to go too much into the details on all of that, but what I want to get to is the response to that, where the hand works. So in this case, I decided to use Omote Gyaku, the outside wrist reverse. Some people call it wrist twist, wrist lock, whatever, but it's the outside, taking the hand to the outside. And what I wanted to emphasize was the grip. This is something that I see people struggle with. The idea of that you're trying to break the structure of the hand, not break the hand, but you're trying to break the structure of the hand in order to weaken the hand. And it's interesting when you have people that grab they grab the gi jacket, and this person's like, and they can't dislodge this hand, and they fight with this and stuff. And my point was is that you have to develop the hand strength. Hand strength is something that I think people could really do a lot more emphasis with, because we don't live in a society that focuses on the strength of our bodies, of our hands, because we're in a digital society. All the strength you need in your hand is to be able to move a mouse or hit a touchpad and tap on a keyboard and shuffle some papers. And so our hand strength overall is actually very weak compared to the history when our predecessors that trained in these arts lived very physical lives. The hands were very calloused, very strong. They carried things, they lifted things, they chopped wood, they did gardening, they did all these things that strengthened the hands. And then the training for the art was all about strengthening the hands. Shito-jutsu, the idea of using the fingers as weapons, was really emphasized. And so the fingers themselves were very strong, very flexible. And this is something that we, as a generalization, that we lack. Yet it's so foundational to the way these kata and techniques function. And so, getting back to my original topic, when when this hand is there, yeah, of course you're covering it lightly because you don't want to give messages. But there's a point when you need to weaken the structure of that hand in order to dislodge the hand. And I wanted to emphasize the importance of fingertips, because what I was noticing, and this is something I've brought up many times in class before, people have a tendency to grip with the pads of their fingers. And so when you see somebody grab a hand, you'll see this a lot, where the fingers are flat, the thumb is flat, and they're using the pads. And this is actually in my opinion, this is a big vulnerability. It's a big problem. I'll share a little bit about my history. Back in my younger, more cockier and tougher days, I was in law enforcement. I did investigations and stuff, but for a period, I also was doing loss prevention investigations. And I actually ended up in a situation where I had a guy attack me with a knife and pepper spray. So, and and in that exchange, or in that moment when that was happening, the pepper spray was leaving oil all over me, and I'm trying to fight this person who's stabbing me with this knife. And I got this person in a type of Omote Gyaku, but I couldn't hold on to him. He was just slipping out. And every time I was trying to get a hold of it, the hands would slip. And then there's been other situations, particularly like when I'm in law enforcement and stuff, where I'm having to use restraint holds or trying to hold somebody and trying to grab them, where they're just slippery because they're bloody, sweaty. Maybe there's drugs coming out of their pores that makes their skin slimy. Hard to hold on to. In class, uh, people tend to not be sweaty. They tend to, so it's easier to kind of hang on. But when you're doing like actual, like more randori or more intense training, and the body starts getting sweaty, then you start to see this with his hands slipping. So the importance of the fingertip are vital in that the fingertips are like hooks. The fingertips hook into the opponent's hand, but at the same time, they are also strikes, in essence, that they are actually striking the bone structures to separate the bones of the hand, to weaken the hand, to attack the ligaments that hold everything together. So the hand becomes weaker. And this is my point that I wanted to make with these guys, is that instead of using the pads of the hands, I was telling them to use the fingertips. The fingertips. So the way that, and I'm going to take I'm going to take a side from my normal approach in these videos, and I'm going to offer you some technical instruction. So the way that I was having them grab the hand was to this meaty part right here, was to wrap these fingers around that and bury the tips of these fingers into the seam right here, into the hand. So it comes around, and I don't know if you can see it, the fingers snake around and curl into that. It's not here pressing straight in. It's actually a curl of the fingers. It's the same way we grab. When you grab, you curl the fingers into the palm to grab versus pulling into the palm, which is more difficult. It's you simply do that, and that's what by doing that you create that good solid hold. As far as the thumb goes, you have the bones of the hand. The thumb tip goes between those points depending on the size of your hand, size of their hand. It could be down here, up here, whatever, or up here. But by doing that, you're using this hooking motion and pressing with the fingertips, and that allows for the hand, the bones of the hand to open. And I'm not even talking about Kyusho as far as like pain or anything like that. Not everybody responds to pain. So I want to eliminate that from the discussion. What I'm focusing on is how to weaken the structure of the hand. So by doing that, it creates that. But what was noticed that they discovered is that when they went from this to this, is that it closed the space in the palm between the palm and the back of the hand, where here you could see that space, and as they curled these fingers tightly and pushed, it closed that space. And in doing that, they were able to have maximum surface area coverage and leverage on that hand so that when they then moved their body, used their taijutsu, to break the wrist structure and start manipulating the uke's body structure, it became easier to then take the hand off the jacket, and it became easier to throw the guy. That by doing this function, they didn't have to use these muscles to try to muscle that thing apart. Just doing that and having their hand collapse in like that and gripping in that spot and having that just do that, the hand strength is what created that. And then once that was set, the uke's bones changed and it started to cause that chain reaction in the body, all by just using the grip of the hand. But it was the hooking of the fingertips that facilitated it. So the hand is a big surface, but it's the tiniest parts that actually were the most critical in making that happen. And that leads to my point that was brought up in class that I want to share with you is that it's the little details that matter. The little things create the big things. It's the little things that connect the dots. So when we train and we practice in class, it becomes really easy to look at things as big things. You want the kata, you want the whole thing. You want to do the big throw or the big finish, or you want to do something that knocks the person across the room, whatever. Everything is just so big and exaggerated. You want to make these big movements, but it's the micro details that matter. And that's the thing that requires you to have to really step back in your training and really start dissecting those pieces. And don't worry about whether or not you can throw this guy, lock the arm, create this great technique, whatever. Mm-mm. Can you get your fingertips to curl into the guy's hand? And can you do it with enough strength and um, enough leverage in those fingertips that it creates the break structure of the hand to even allow this to begin? And that's the most critical point. Other little types of details that we focused on in class, little things like your foot, like when you're facing somebody in kamae and they're going to start their attack, watch their toes and their lead foot. Do the toes open up to grab more ground to pull, or do the toes crimp down? Watch that. Those are micro details. I'm not going to go into that too much, but there is a very important lesson when it comes to the how you use your toes in all the movement. Um, so that's a micro detail that is a Kihon no Kihon. It's a basic of the basic. Little things like how to use the shoulder blades, your scapulas, the muscles between your shoulder blades, how that works to create arm motion, to create dynamic power in your, not just your kamae, but actually how you deliver blocks and punches, and even the gyaku, or even how you cut with the sword, how the scapula play into that. Another little micro detail, and this is something else that was brought up in class, the flexibility, range of motion of the neck. This is something that we don't see a lot, or at least in my experience, I don't see a lot either with the way people train. They spend a long time focusing on the flexibility of the legs, the arms, whatever, your back, but I don't see a lot of emphasis on the range of motion of the head. And we live in a society where we don't really use our range of motion on our head. We're looking forward, we're looking at keyboards and all this stuff, and we hold a lot of tension up here. And so when people line up in kamae, when they stand in kamae or they move, a lot of times you'll see the head being off, or the nose will be pointing off the line, instead of having, trying to get things to line up right. This versus this. I know it looks silly, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. I see this a lot with people when they're in their kamae, or they're throwing their punch or whatever, that the nose is pointing offline because it's a range of motion issue. But these are where the juicy bits are, right in here, and you've got targeting here, that the head used to be. These are micro details that matter. And if you have to do, in order to do that, you have to flex everything back here to hold that. That tells you that's a developmental issue, that you need to develop that in your body. So those are things that I wanted to share with you. And I wanted to use that example from my class the other night about just the simple thing like how to grip the hand, how to break the structure of the hand by using your fingertips, the importance of the fingertips in all of that. Um, that that these are little details that are, in my opinion, that's Kihon. Those are basics. Those are things that should be taught from day one, that you need to start, and it's a conditioning exercise. You have to condition the hands for that. Take Omote Gyaku, for instance, being able to turn that hand over. That requires strength. You have to be strong to do that, because if this guy grabs you and he locks on with that, you're not going to turn that arm over. It's just not going to happen if you don't develop the right strength, using the fingertips correctly, and knowing where to attack the bone structures and the ligament structures to weaken that. You're never going to be able to do that, let alone dislodge it from your gi. So I hope that gave you something useful. And I'm being very careful because I don't want to fall into this online teacher kind of thing where I'm teaching technique over the internet. But I wanted to at least share those details with you that maybe you can take a look at in your own training if you have a teacher and you're being taught well. That those are things that hopefully maybe in your own training you get an aha moment, and now you have something to really start trying to work on, because you don't want to just keep jumping from thing to thing and think you understand it. It's actually better to have less but go deeper with what you know than it is to have more but only be shallow with all of it. That the depth really matters, and that's how you do it. You have to dissect deeper and deeper into the little details, and have the right coaching or the right people that can help you along that journey, so that you're not lost fumbling around in the dark with different theories and creative ideas, that you're actually learning something that's that's real and legitimate, and not just somebody's fancy imagination. So anyway, that's another topic. But I hope you enjoy this. I hope you find it useful. Certainly share your experiences. What little micro details have you discovered in your training that helps you, or that maybe your teacher taught you that completely revolutionized your view of something? Something simple, one of our Kihon kata, and then suddenly one day you get this epiphany, or you realize something, somebody says something, or your teacher shows you something, and it completely changes your whole view of it. Share that in the comments. I'd be interested to see what you have to say about that. So again, thank you all for the great support. Thank you for the great comments. I'm loving the dialogue that I'm having with people. And if there's anything that you would like me to to address or discuss in any future videos, please let me know. You can hit me up. Shoot it in the comments or something, or reach out through my school's page, Facebook page, drop me a message or whatever. Just reach out to me, let me know, and I'll do my best to see if I can cover it, as long as it fits within the parameters of what I'm willing to share on YouTube. So, again, thank you so much. And as I always say, stay happy, stay healthy, and no matter what, keep training.